Okay, we're going to get started. Welcome everyone to the latest episode of Scrubbing the Skies, the webinar series of the Institute for Carbon Removal at American University. As always, I'm the host of the show, Will Burns, co-director of the Institute. And I'd like to welcome everyone for joining us on this Friday. So in the last year, critiques of the voluntary carbon market have become ever more kinetic, and in two major contexts. First of all, the question of whether these markets are fit for purpose in terms of helping us to sufficiently scale up the carbon removal in a relevant time frame, as well as the question of whether it can establish necessary standards of integrity for the carbon removal markets to ensure both public confidence as well as critical investor confidence. And in the last year, the U.S. federal government, through the Department of Energy's Office of Fossil Energy and Carbon Management, has been trying to address both questions in terms of new initiatives, which include efforts to develop a system of public procurement to help drive demand, bring down prices, ensure learning by doing, and to develop standards or principles for responsible carbon management that can help inform both the voluntary markets and probably ultimately compliance markets in this context. And I'm pleased today to have two of the people from the Department of Energy that have helped develop this initiative and will help drive this initiative forward in the future to discuss both of these efforts. First of all is Haley McKee, who serves as Domestic Engagement Program Analyst for the Office of Fossil Energy and Carbon Management at DOE, as well as Rory Jacobson, who is Acting Division Director for Carbon Dioxide Removal in the office. We will begin with initial interventions by both Harley and Rory to set up the contours of these new initiatives. I will then move to a couple of questions to seed the conversation, and then we will move to audience questions. And so I'd like to encourage everyone to begin to start populating the Q&A box with your questions. And with that, I will turn things over to Haley.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for that introduction, Will. And it's a pleasure to be here. And I'm excited to share more about the Responsible Carbon Management Initiative. So with that, I will go ahead and share my screen. And can everyone see? Perfect. So just to briefly introduce myself, I'm Haley McKee, Program Analyst here on the Domestic Engagement Team at FECM at DOE. And in my work, I support DOE's engagement with communities on carbon management in the United States. That includes conducting workshops and other events in regions where DOE has funded carbon management projects. And I also develop resources tailored for community-based audiences that provide information on different carbon management topics and the projects in FECM's portfolio, with a real emphasis on risks and benefits, health and safety, and regulation. These are responsive to community concerns. And of course, I also manage FECM's Responsible Carbon Management Initiative, and that's what I'll be discussing today. So just to provide an overview, in August of 2023, FECM announced our intent to launch the Responsible Carbon Management Initiative, or RCMI. And this spans, just to note, the whole of the carbon management sector. So we're talking about carbon dioxide removal projects, but also capture, transport, storage, and conversion. So the full carbon management ecosystem. And the initiative aims to really encourage and recognize project developers and others in the sector to pursue these really high levels of safety, environmental stewardship, accountability, and community engagement, really bringing to the fore the societal benefits in carbon management projects. So the announcement at the time included a request for information that solicited input from all stakeholders on the initiative, from those in the sector to communities, environmental justice organizations, tribes, a public request, and we requested both input on the initiative itself and how it could be effective, and also on the draft principles for responsible carbon management projects that were included at the same time. And that comment period closed in September of last year. And we are now finalizing these principles that are updated with the feedback we received from more than 80 comments and consultation with other Department of Energy offices. So there may be some folks in the audience who contributed to the principles, and thank you for engaging with them. So just to take a quick step back, I wanted to share the rationale for the RCMI. Why do this? And FECM recognized that these high standards and excellence need to be pursued for carbon management projects to be successfully deployed for climate action. So really a recognition that excellence is essential for success. And the Department of Energy's community benefit plans framework that's required for federal funding for carbon management projects sets clear expectations related to engagement, workforce development, diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility, and energy justice for DOE-funded projects. So the RCMI can function as a way to reflect and complement this initial framework. And this is also really an opportunity to establish a shared set of principles that complement regulatory structures to advance responsible deployment of carbon management projects in a way that can span both public and privately funded projects. So we're thinking about not only DOE funded projects, but also private projects or university-based research projects, and creating a shared community of excellence. So what's next at this phase? In summer of 2024, so hopefully very soon, we plan to launch a pilot phase of the RCMI, and that's going to include the finalized principles, which will be published on an FECM-affiliated RCMI website. And that's going to include comprehensive resources and references for project developers, as well as other carbon management stakeholders like communities hosting projects, to really set these principles in context and provide information and guidance that can be used to really, bring these principles into action. And I also just want to take a second to talk about this because we're seeing a lot of really great tools, best practices, reports, and research coming out of the carbon management, carbon dioxide removal sector. And I think that this is really going to be a living document or a living knowledge library that we're going to be continually wanting to solicit input and improvement on from, all stakeholders. And we're really exploring initiatives to encourage awareness, adoption, and engagement on the RCMI in the carbon management sector. So please stay tuned for future announcements on, taking this to the next level. And so when we think about opportunities for involvement, we're really looking forward to continuing our engagement with the carbon removal and broader carbon management sector. again, to really find ways to socialize and encourage implementation of the principles. And again, acknowledging we've seen companies in the sector engage on developing principles and pledges around responsible carbon removal. And it's my goal and the goal of, other folks on my team to create this dialogue and a community of support around this topic that results in greater success for and co-benefits from both public and privately funded projects. So again, creating this whole sector, raising the level of excellence and, yeah, just getting that kind of involvement, and not only from those within the carbon removal, carbon management sector, but also facilitating that two-way engagement and communication that is central to my work on the domestic engagement team, bringing in the expertise of communities that are hosting carbon management projects, environmental justice organizations, getting the insights of disadvantaged communities on what their priorities and challenges are, and really facilitating those honest conversations and taking that knowledge into the future in deploying these projects. So with that, I just wanted to say thank you. And again, please stay tuned. And my inbox is open. So if you have any further questions about the initiative or, want to share anything with me, please go ahead and reach out. I'm really looking forward to the future of this initiative, and, getting, again, engagement from everyone involved is going to make it that much better. So thank you. And again, really appreciate being here. And with that, I'll stop sharing and pass it over.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Haley. And so grateful for all of your work and all the work that our domestic engagement team does. It's really awesome. Let me see if I can share my screen now. We're going to switch gears a little bit. Oops. Awesome. So I'm Rory Jacobson. I'm our acting division director for carbon dioxide removal at the Office of Fossil Energy and Carbon Management. Mostly what that means is that I manage all of our programs related to research, development, and demonstration of carbon dioxide removal technologies. I get to work with Haley and her team to think about how we talk about these technologies when we engage with communities, how to make sure that they have input and perspective for the just and equitable and appropriate deployment, I think responsible deployment of CDR technologies. But most of this to date at DOE has looked like research and development. So investing in early stage technologies to think about their efficacy, their efficiency at removing CO2 from the atmosphere or our oceans. And I think, there's been a lot of chatter both in the private sector and also I think in the NGO community about the importance of thinking about markets for CDR. I think, all of us sort of envision CDR, most of us envision CDR as a public good, this idea that we're removing CO2 from the atmosphere, that it's the legacy emissions that have already been polluted, or those residual emissions that are really hard to decarbonize that will continue to drive warming in future years. And that accordingly, it's important for, I think, the US government to take responsibility to consider how to build markets in addition to just investing in research and development for these technologies. And I'll thank Will and the Institute for hosting us and letting us have this dialogue today. But I think, there's an important conversation about the history of voluntary carbon markets that we won't have time to get into. But I think that there are, some trust challenges there. And I think the program that I'll talk about today, the CDR Purchase Pilot Prize, complements the RCMI principles very well in the sense that it's a lot about engagement and trust. And I think that having this opportunity to do a pilot before the US government really attempts to scale up, large scale, climatically relevant CDR purchasing, that we have a dialogue with communities, we have a dialogue with industry and other stakeholders, and that we make sure that we're prioritizing Justice 40, workforce and labor, and just engagement across the portfolio. And so today I'm really excited to talk to you about work that we've gotten to do on the CDR Purchase Pilot Prize. And I'm specifically going to focus on our recent announcement of our phase one selections. And I'm going to get a little bit into program design, why we designed the program and the criteria the way we did. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about our phase one winners and the future of the program. But I think this is a really exciting moment for CDR. We've had, a lot of research and development dollars invested, even demonstration for programs like direct air capture hubs. And this is, at least to my knowledge, and I would love a correction, the first national program to buy high quality, durable CDR at any significant scale. And so I think it's really exciting that DOE has this leadership opportunity, but there's also a lot, I think, for us to prove and get right in this program. And so I'll dive into some of the details, but eager to hear your feedback as well today. So I think one of the first pieces I want to talk about, which I often do when talking about any program that DOE runs, is where did the money come from, and how are we implementing it? And so when the infrastructure law passed, I know everyone was so excited about the regional direct air capture hubs, but there was also a commercial DAC prize as well. And so in addition to this $3.5 billion to go build these million-ton facilities, we also had a really important investment in scaling up CDR at earlier stages as well, and not just DAC technologies. And so one important piece of this was $100 million for a commercial prize. We also have a pre-commercial prize that I'm not going to talk about today for earlier stage technologies. But we split this prize, or the funding for the prize, into two different pieces. So the first of which I'm going to focus on today, is the CDR Purchase Pilot Prize, of which we have allocated up to $35 million in cash prizes over 3 years, or sorry, over 3 phases, not 3 years. And again, like I said, to my knowledge, this is the first national effort to purchase high quality CDR credits from commercial scale suppliers. And I think it's a really important way to build competitive demand for our domestic CDR market, but also to demonstrate to other governments that this is a possibility. The direct procurement of CDR is something that federal governments can do, and that while diligence on these projects is hard, and I'm going to get into that, it is an important role for government to play in scaling up the ecosystem. It can't just be R&D investment. And so we just wrapped up our first phase, where we selected 24 competitors to compete in phase 2. I'll talk about that more in a second. But they're ultimately competing for up to $3 million each in the final phase for actual delivery of their CDR credits. And I'll get into the logistics of what exactly that looks like. And one important, I think, consideration is that because this is a commercial prize, competitors are required to deliver DOE a minimum of 3,000 CDR credits over the prize period. And they have a 3-year window in that third phase to do that work. And so this all kicked off just last year. In September, we put out rules. We sought feedback on those rules over the course of about a month and a half, and we got a lot of very productive feedback from the community. So again, if you submitted comments to that, we appreciate it. And then we had phase 1 applications due on December 15th. And my colleagues at DOE, the national labs, and other independent reviewers really had our work cut out for us. So I'll talk a bit about the review process, but reviewing CDR projects or CDR credit proposals for government purchase is very different than what we've seen from efforts in the private sector, whether it be Microsoft or Frontier. There are a lot of procurement sensitivities and process questions that we have to answer about how to do this well, transparently and rigorously. The other portion of the commercial direct air capture prize that I'm not going to talk so much about today is an additional $65 million that we intend to allocate to another prize that will fund DAC pilot, direct air capture pilot facilities that are capable of capturing at least 5,000 tons of atmospheric CO2 per year. And so I guess maybe it's important to set context with where we are now. So just last month, we announced 24 semifinalists across 4 different areas of interest that will actually have an opportunity to participate in the phase 2, which is really exciting. I actually see some of you all on the call. So again, congratulations. So those semifinalists won a $50K milestone payment towards developing their CDR credit proposal. I'll talk a little bit about the submissions that we received in that phase 1 and the scope of those submission packages. And then they're ultimately competing. We just released rules when we selected our semifinalists for phases 2 and 3. Phase 2 has 2 components. First, where they're sort of developing their CDR offtake agreement for submission to the DOE. Basically, all of the contractual provisions that they'll consider for delivery of their CDR credits, but also updates on the progress towards implementing their project that will deliver those CDR credits. And I'll get into some specifics on that. And then I think just more broadly, this program is aligning, I think, a number of things that we've seen at DOE to set up CDR for success. We understand that things like the RCMI are important to the entire carbon management ecosystem and supply chain. But we also think that in addition to, just engagement, DEIA, and all of the other important Justice 40 considerations, that there is a role for markets to play in this, and that government leadership on establishing what high quality CDR looks like not only can help more non-governmental actors purchase CDR, it also sets a global precedent that this is possible, like I said. And so again, I think it gets into why do this. The first is to catalyze development for a national CDR market. I think we can provide a really strong demand signal indicating that if the US government is capable of doing this, the private sector and philanthropy are as well. We're hoping to catalyze follow-on purchases through the phase 2. Part of what teams will be scored on in their second phase alongside their CDR purchase agreement is also whether or not they're actually able to incite additional buyers during that second phase. So is there a market for the CDR credit that they're offering beyond DOE, and how scalable is their solution? And also encouraging, I think, project finance investment, which has been a key barrier for CDR projects to develop effectively. One of our favorite topics at DOE, measurement, monitoring, reporting, and verification. It's been challenging for carbon markets more broadly, and I think is something that DOE has been, and especially fossil energy and carbon management, have been really excited to work on. We had a lab call now about a year and a half ago with our colleagues at Office of Technology Transitions and Office of Clean Energy Demonstrations to fund 4 different projects across the US to both do fundamental science on, but also to develop frameworks for MMRV for different CDR pathways and to establish best practices and standards for what that should look like. A lot of that will tie into the rules and assessment of what good MMRV frameworks should be for this prize. And then I think Haley and her colleagues make this point so well, but really in addition to removing CO2 from the atmosphere, it's developing the workforce and community benefits associated with high quality CDR. So yes, making sure that the net CO2 removed LCA looks great, but also ensuring that we're benefiting America's workforce, we're scaling labor that is equitable, inclusive, and again, making sure that the co-benefits of these solutions are flowing to communities that need it most. And I think it's important to sort of roadmap where this exists within the broader ecosystem of carbon management and removal programs at DOE. And so Office of Science is the Energy Earthshot Centers. One of those is looking at soil carbon sequestration as a consortium of land-grant universities, national labs. We released a funding announcement earlier this year for carbon negative shot pilots, where we're currently reviewing applications for $100 million invested in pilots for an entire suite of different CDR pathways. I mentioned that we're still waiting to put out a CDR DAC, a commercial DAC pilot prize. And then we also, in the background, are funding currently paper studies that will ultimately matriculate to 2 field validation tests for direct ocean capture removal. And then there is a whole suite of other programs, including direct air capture hubs, ARPA-E, the Advanced Research Project Agency for Energy is doing a whole bunch of work on MRV hardware and software. And then, of course, some of the MRV work that I mentioned before with the national labs. And all of this is among, an ecosystem of other carbon management infrastructure. So Carbon Safe for carbon storage, CFIA to invest in safe CO2 transportation where needed. And then interagency technical assistance, both helping to develop Class 6 permits and on the 45Q tax credit, which is for direct air capture and point source capture. And then, of course, also all of our work through mission innovation, helping to lead the CDR Launchpad and sharing all of our findings in the CDR purchase pilot with our colleagues internationally. And so I think we should get into the details. There are 4 different areas of interest for this prize, specifically looking at direct air capture and storage. Storage could either been in a product that has durable storage or in the subsurface. Biomass with carbon removal and storage, or Bikers technologies, so converting biomass to more durable forms, whether that's sequestering the CO2 in the subsurface or burying the biomass. I'll talk a bit more about some of the approaches that we saw in that area of interest. Enhanced geological weathering or enhanced mineralization technology, so enhanced rock weathering, whether it's in agricultural fields or in engineered systems. And then a sort of 4th broader category, so alternative planned and managed carbon sinks, including natural and artificial. This is actually in our authorizing congressional statute and is inclusive of, I think I'll share with you, a wide variety of different CDR technologies that don't fall into those first 3 categories. And I think I've kind of laid the groundwork. I don't feel like I need to say much on this slide, but we selected 24 semifinalists with a total allocation of $1.2 million in our first phase. It doesn't sound like much, but I think the opportunity, one, for them to be able to earn those up to $3 million contracts for their phase three. And then, of course, all of the additional demand that we're hoping to drive towards these high quality CDR projects. I'm optimistic that we can help incite, I think, a lot more demand in the coming months. Again, this is sort of just where we sit. So for phase two, they're again delivering their CDR purchase agreements. This is functionally the contract in the terms that they would deliver those CDR credits on. And those 10 teams that do make it to phase two, part two, will win up to $375,000. And then for phase three, they're actually designing sort of their CDR credit delivery, I guess cadence is maybe the best term. So over the 3 years that phase three runs, they'll get to say how many credits they want to deliver in each year. They have to deliver at least 3,000. They might be able to deliver more. And then I think it's important to get into the evaluation criteria and how we actually assess any of these technologies in their CDR credit proposals. So of course, we love acronyms at DOE. We looked at their comprehensive life cycle assessment. We looked at their techno-economic assessment framework. So is this a technology that's removing a lot of CO2 for the other greenhouse gases that it emits? Are the economics of this technology or CDR approach favorable? And how scalable is it? Like, do the economics improve drastically as they scale up? And we set pretty firm boundaries for what TEA and LCA guidance look like. We also asked for a durability or storage term. And so we used geologic storage as the baseline for that, saying that it had to be geologic storage or equivalent, which obviously the US has a lot of regulatory framework on through the Class 6 program at EPA. And I think I was very impressed to see how some of the competitors interpreted that. I think we saw really rigorous and thoughtful approaches to what durability looks like for high quality CDR. Importantly, I think, as Haley noted, community benefits plans are a big piece of all of our CDR work. And so they not only have to develop a community benefits plan in the second phase, they also have to execute on it while they're doing their phase three. And so in addition to, of course, tons of CDR credits delivered, we're also optimistic to see benefits from these projects flow to communities, including workforce development and other environmental and ecosystem co-benefits. And then I think, again, really important is their MRV approach. So do they have a robust methodology and an independent, unbiased implementation partner that can oversee and provide attestation services that the CDR that's been removed, the measurements that have been taken, have actually been taken, and to provide independent validation of those CDR credits. Of course, we also look at the technology, making sure that their CDR credit concept proposal provided a thorough overview of the technology that they're proposing to develop, including all of the inputs and outputs, mass and energy balance. And then, of course, I think the other piece is, like, is this a team that is going to succeed within this prize ultimately? Like, are they bringing the expertise, the capabilities, the funding required to scale up their approach within the timeframe of the prize and deliver CDR credits to DOE? And so you might be thinking this is a substantial ask here, and it really was. But again, I think our entire department was impressed with the teams that were able to step up and offer really awesome proposals for how they want to do this. And I'm excited to see both their developments in phase two and developing their CDR purchase agreements, but also their community benefit plans and ultimately the projects that deliver these CDR credits to DOE. And so getting into some of the teams that were phase one winners, now semifinalists, we've provided team location, lead organization here, and then just a very brief summary of their proposed technology or project. And so I'm just going to let everyone sit on each of these, and I'll provide a description of each of the areas of interest and let you know who our semifinalists are. And then so area of interest 2, biomass carbon removal with storage technologies. Again, I think the creativity and versatility of some of these approaches was great to see. It's everything from pyrolyzing biomass and injecting bio oil into the subsurface to just or to burying biomass bricks in the subsurface, then monitoring that to make sure they don't decompose. Production of biochar in the field application, which is exciting and interesting. And then also opportunities, of course, to produce energy alongside biomass. Of course, in the bikers framework, we think mostly about the carbon benefit, but also acknowledging that it's important to consider the energy can also be produced from biomass. And some of these CDR credit offerings also do that as well as a co-revenue stream. Enhanced geological weathering or enhanced mineralization technologies. You'll see slightly less or slightly fewer selections than in the DAC technologies area. But again, very diverse array of technologies or CDR pathways deployed in different geographies. And then finally, I think area of interest 4, we really saw what we at DOE and I think others would call marine CDR technologies, most of them electrochemical, but basically producing or increasing alkalinity to increase the drawdown of atmospheric CO2 into the upper hydrosphere. And again, some of these technologies already being in DOE's portfolio. So great to see that some of the R&D investments being made are also translating to companies with commercial CDR credit offerings. And then I just wanted to briefly show a map that I think sort of indicates both the geographic diversity of where these companies are popping up. It's not just California and New York, it's also Texas, Minnesota. We're seeing a wide diversity of states develop innovative CDR technologies. And this isn't necessarily where their final product or projects will actually be developed. It's just the company location. But again, I think it demonstrates that the US does have a lot of CDR capacity in different geographies just based on resource availability. And it's exciting to see startups and even commercial companies developing across our nation. And then finally, I'll just close by talking a bit about, I think, the ambition of this program more broadly. We were really excited to see that in our budget language for FY24, that we got an additional $20 million to continue our CDR purchasing efforts. And so with that in mind, I think it's important that we reflect on the successes of this program, yes, but also some of the challenges that we've encountered. And so we're trying to advance the technology readiness level of different CDR pathways across our areas of interest. We are, again, of course, trying to remove CO2 and have CDR credits delivered to the US government within the timeframe of the prize. We're establishing best practices for monitoring, measuring, reporting, and verification that the private sector can copy, or that even just establish standards of best practice for CDR suppliers. I think really importantly to attract follow-on purchases of carbon dioxide removal credits from the voluntary carbon market. I hope that these semifinalists are seen as at least initial excitement from the Department of Energy about the technologies and pathways that these competitors are offering, and that they leverage the diligence that we've already done on these projects to follow the CDR purchases that we're making, and also to help these companies matriculate through phase 2 and offer additional demand for those credits. And then I think one other challenge has just been consistent contracting for carbon credits more broadly, but I think definitely carbon dioxide removal. And so establishing, I think, core precedents for what a good CDR offtake agreement looks like. Is it fair to the supplier? Is it fair to the buyer? Is it bankable for a project financier? And then I think finally, to strengthen the US federal government's position as a leader in the carbon management space. I'm really excited that we get to do this program. And I'm optimistic about the findings that we'll have in phase 2 and very excited for all of our semifinalists. So with that, I'll pass it back to Will, and thank you all again for hosting us.
All right. Thank you so much, Haley and Rory. And so I just want to move to a couple of initial questions, and then I'll move to audience questions. And again, I encourage everybody to propagate the box. So Haley, I wanted to start off with the RCMI. Now, some of the things that you're talking about, right? Fostering principles of environmental justice, development of community benefit agreements, and so forth, are components that were included in government requirements, I think, prior to this for at least where there's government funding. What do you contemplate were the gaps, and how might some of those gaps be filled in the prospective standards that are being developed?
Yeah, that's a really great question. And I think for the RCMI, what is special about it and the way the principles are developed is that we encouraged input from and are including input from a diverse variety of stakeholders. So we were receiving guidance and information on, ways to implement environmental responsibility principles, for example, input on tribal consultation, on developing health and safety and emergency response plans that were coming from, the public, that were coming from outside of the Department of Energy or the federal sector. And so there are, both in the initial draft of the RCMI principles and what you'll see in the final version, are some specific encouraged guidelines or values or benchmarks for carbon management project developers to implement that are coming externally from this input that we received, this feedback. So I think that what it does is, again, kind of provides this framework, especially along with the resources and guidance that we plan to include alongside the principles themselves, that non-DOE funded projects can look at and say, okay, like here is a standard. How does this apply in the context of my particular project? Where are we potentially already hitting those benchmarks? And what do we need to work on? What do we need to improve? And so I think that that's really where the information, the value lies in the RCMI, is that it has some, concrete examples, some guidance for actionable things that project developers can do to ensure that their projects are as beneficial as possible.
Okay. In the early stages, at least of the development of the first two DAC hubs, there was substantial criticism from some environmental justice groups, especially about the nature of the process of community engagement. Do you think that these standards would specifically address some of those concerns? And if yes, how?
Yeah, so community engagement is actually one of the principles included in the RCMI. So I won't list all 10 of them, but community engagement, workforce development and quality jobs, environmental justice, long-term stewardship, et cetera. So that community engagement principle arguably was the one that received the most feedback and a lot of really constructive public feedback on, this is, we need engagement to be happening earlier, not later. We need to know what, this is how project developers need to be thinking about who should be included when they're thinking about a host or local community to their project. These are the parameters that they need to use when making sure that everyone is included equitably in that process. We got a ton of feedback on that. So I think that, again, like that piece is going to be like a very beneficial, guide for project developers in doing community engagement, and sort of like thinking about, again, like the specific context of their project and who they should be engaging when and how to go about it in a respectful and good faith way.
Okay. All right. A question for Rory, and I know you've heard this one before. Public procurement. One of the objectives that you mentioned, I think, is really salutary, is starting to send signals to market of sound standards in terms of carbon removal. I think Sweden's been doing that also in a way that I think will be really helpful in the long term for both the compliance and the voluntary markets. But the amount of actual money for procurement, right, is extremely modest, right? And I know it's trying to drive some private sector funding also. But what would you say to the critique that it's so modest, even for each individual project, that it won't really move the needle in terms of facilitating development of these individual projects or processes?
Yeah, it's a good question. Well, and first I'm going to apologize for sharing my presenter screen for the entire time. So hopefully I have a good podcast voice. I'll share the slides with Will and colleagues so that they can be posted wherever. Yeah, I think the short answer is that you have to you have to walk before you can run. I think that in order to demonstrate that the US government and DOE are capable of doing an exercise like this, it's important to establish